Hey everyone, these photos have stories. Some will stick with you. A group of Navajo riders disappearing into the distance, 1904. Curtis spent 30 years documenting more than 80 tribes, driven by the fear that their way of life would vanish from the earth. On the morning of April 18, 1906, an earthquake woke up the entire city. It remains the deadliest earthquake in American history. A collapsible lifeboat pulls up alongside the Carpathia at 7:15 in the morning, 1912. This was the last lifeboat successfully launched from the Titanic. On board were two young boys whose father put them in the boat and stayed behind on the sinking ship. In 1917, two young girls from an English village were believed by almost no one, except Arthur Conan Doyle, the man who created Sherlock Holmes. He was convinced the photos were real. In fact, the fairies were paper cutouts. August 1919. A pilot secretly took off in the early morning hours and flew straight through the opening of the Arc de Triomphe. The gap between his wings and the walls was just a few meters. He lost his pilot's license shortly after. In this 1927 photograph, 29 scientists are gathered together. 17 of them would go on to win the Nobel Prize. Einstein, Marie Curie, Niels Bohr, all in the same room. This is where the famous debate about the nature of the quantum world took place. To get this shot in 1948, assistants threw 3 cats and a bucket of water into the air over and over again, while Dali himself leapt. 28 takes in a row. Pablo Picasso, 1969. A portrait taken 4 years before the death of the man who changed the history of art. That sharp, alive look of the greatest genius of the 20th century. May 1939. A photograph of 12-year-old Anne Frank, taken 2 years before her family went into hiding. The photographer quietly pulled the cigar out of the British Prime Minister's mouth right before pressing the shutter in 1941. "He looked at me like he could eat me alive," the photographer recalled. This became the most reproduced portrait in the history of photography. 1942. A janitor at a government building stands in front of the American flag, a broom in one hand and a mop in the other. A deliberate nod to the famous painting American Gothic. The photographer called his camera his weapon against racism. Shot from a torpedo bomber in 1944, the moment a Japanese cargo ship takes a hit. One of the rare documentary images of naval combat. A Cuban photographer took this shot in a crowd at a rally and kept it at home for 7 years, showing it to no one. In 1967, the photo spread across the entire world and by some accounts became the most recognized photograph in human history. The first digital image, 1957. The creator scanned a photo of his 3-month-old son. Small in size, this portrait became the ancestor of every digital image on Earth. Yuri Gagarin in 1961. Just months after becoming the first human to orbit the Earth. That famous smile that made him the face of an entire era. President Kennedy riding in an open limousine in 1963, just minutes before the shots were fired. His advisors had warned of the threat, but the roof was taken off the car anyway. In the early 1950s, polio paralyzed hundreds of thousands of children every year. For many of them, the only way to breathe was inside an iron lung, a large metal chamber that did the breathing for them. In 1955, a teenager from Chicago was killed in Mississippi because a woman claimed he had been disrespectful to her. His mother insisted on an open casket. She wanted the world to see what had been done to her son. On September 4, 1957, a 15-year-old girl walked alone through a crowd screaming threats at her. President Eisenhower sent federal troops to escort 9 black teenagers to class. On August 15, 1961, On the third day of construction of the Berlin Wall, an East German border guard jumped over the unfinished barrier and ran to the west. The photo circled the world within hours and became a symbol of the Cold War. On November 24, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald was shot in the corridor of the Dallas Police Headquarters in front of television cameras from around the world. The first murder broadcast live on television. The photo won the Pulitzer Prize. May 1965. Muhammad Ali stands over his fallen opponent, shouting, "Get up!" instead of going to a neutral corner as the rules require. On February 1, 1968, the chief of South Vietnam's National Police shot a prisoner in the head on a street in Saigon, and a camera caught the moment. The photo won the Pulitzer Prize, but the photographer himself regretted its publication for the rest of his life. July 20, 1969. Neil Armstrong is reflected in the visor of the helmet. The photo was taken on the moon by the man wearing it. Armstrong barely appears in any lunar photographs precisely because he was the one holding the camera the whole time. On September 5, 1972, during the Munich Olympics, a Palestinian militant group took Israeli athletes hostage. The tragedy changed how security is handled at major international events. On September 5, 1964, thousands of Chileans marched in support of their candidate, the first socialist in the world to attempt to come to power through a free and fair election. April 23, 1855. The road is covered in cannonballs, and there's not a single body in sight. This is one of the most famous war photographs ever taken, shot during the Crimean War in a valley that British soldiers called the Valley of Death. The first photograph of Abraham Lincoln, 1860. This was taken before his presidency. Lincoln was still just a lawyer at the time. For the first time, voters across the country could actually see the face of the man they were voting for. The Stone Bridge, 1862. This was the first photographer to document the American Civil War. This bridge was the site of one of the earliest major battles. The first photograph of a tornado, 1884. Someone with a camera happened to be near a twister in South Dakota and managed to press the shutter in time. This is believed to be the oldest surviving photograph of a tornado ever taken. The first photograph ever printed in a newspaper, March 4, 1880. A shot of a New York slum ran in print for the very first time in history. That day changed journalism forever. 1900. One of the harshest documentary photographs ever taken. A public execution in China, carried out in the presence of foreign soldiers. The Boxer Rebellion was an attempt to drive foreigners out of China. In response, 8 nations sent in troops. Thanks for sticking around till the end. It means a lot. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button and subscribe. More videos like this are coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss them.